there are divisions in every country. There are political divides. France, Italy, Spain, right now as well. Like, but the level, the temperature that it's at in the U.S. is so crazy. I'm seeing things in the news where like these ballot box places in Washington are being set on fire, and I think like you're right. Like you can't write off half the country. These are people's neighbors and family and et cetera, et cetera. And you don't want to call all these people stupid because at least I have empathy that they've followed someone. There's plenty of people who have come out and said, I voted for Trump in 16 and in 20, and I can't believe I followed this guy this far. I am not going to make that mistake again. And so you see some people kind of, coming out of the fog of it all. But the thing that makes it hard to empathize is that some Trump supporters I've seen, they're just so cruel and mean about the whole thing, and that's what worries me about there being some sort of real civil war in the states. And I hope that never comes to pass, because I think the U.S. is it took me a long time to realize, for all its war, it's the U.S. America, what it's built is a very important thing that we need in the world. And so this idea of outrage, it's why I wanted to talk to you, because it's so important. And I don't know how we start pulling some of these people, I don't want to say back to the middle politically, because that means, you know,
Right.
Trump and his supporters have some sort of validity. And I don't think they do. I think they're morally, intellectually bankrupt. But how do we start bringing people back into society so we can all work together to care about each other, to care about each other's children and society, and to build a place we all want to live? Like, I have zero even suggestions. Like, have you found anything? Help me out here, David.
Yeah. Well, certainly there's a lot of people working on the problem. So that's one thing. But, I do want to say
Yeah.
that I don't think I agree that I would count Trump supporters as morally bankrupt. I mean, I think they find themselves in a place that, you were saying sort of before, that they kind of feel hurt and they feel like there's this retribution. And I think that's kind of where things are at with some of them. I don't think, and obviously there's a bunch of other people that support Trump that aren't in that extreme category. They're sort of thinking about
Right.
the economy, and maybe they're not that
Yeah.
engaged with
You
politics.
know what? If, I, if
But
you if you give me a second, I think I'll also like to come back a little bit, because I could feel myself getting a little bit outraged in it, because there are some definitely that have a moral, sorry, that they have no moral equivalent to stand on, and these I
they've
I
crossed
find it to
over,
be
like, yeah, the
very.
guys that have the sort of the Nazi flag with the Trump flag. Yeah, okay, that's the little. I think they've crossed over somewhere, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're right though. There are a lot who just think that for some reason the country is lost forever to a communist, and I think they're believing a lot of things that are just factually completely untrue. So you're right. I appreciate you pulling me off the outrage fence on that one.
And I think some of that comes back to what we're saying about that we hate each other so much, like we're so bitterly divided that that's just clouding our judgment, and we're being fed this stuff. I mean, the media is feeding into it. Social media groups, our filter bubbles are just feeding into it, and it's just a vicious cycle. And if you talk about, one of the ways I've sort of best been able to appreciate, sort of the Trump phenomenon is the sort of metaphor that they're looking, a portion of them are looking for a bodyguard. Like, and when you're looking for a bodyguard, you don't check their criminal record, right? You just want the toughest guy you can get. And they see
Right.
him as that guy that will stand up for them, and they'll say the things that, they'll say the bad things about the other people that they want to hear, and he'll be that tough guy for them. He'll stand up for them. Now, you and I kind of know that he's standing for himself, and all this is, but we can see through that. And they're not seeing that. They're just getting that he's my bodyguard, and I think that's an
Yeah.
interesting way to look at it. And what that means to me is that we have to understand why they think they need a bodyguard. And I think this is where the rest of the country is failing to understand why these people think they need a bodyguard. And that comes back, I think, to your comment about a lot of them feel hurt, they feel left behind, and some of it is grow up and move on, but some of it's real. Like, we have to solve these problems. Like, these are fundamental
Right.
problems that need to be worked on. And many times it's agreement. Like, if you actually figure out what those problems are, people on the left probably want to solve those problems too, right? I mean, they're probably things that we need to work on, and we could be
Yeah.
working on them together instead of being mad at each other all the time.
Yeah. I
So
just don't think it's possible when people are living in such stark realities. Like
Right.
they're on completely different planets, which makes it extremely difficult to try to solve problems in the same way. I think I hate to say liberal media because all the news stations, CNN included, are owned by conservative people now, right? So,
Right.
but the
Right.
the idea that a lot of these news sites are just engendering outrage in a way to keep people engaged. Like
Right.
people want to go back and they want to get angry again, and I think me disconnecting from that in the end of 2020 actually definitely helped my mental health. But I think of it a lot. Even someone said something to me about Instagram a while ago that I think about often is that if you're just scrolling the news feed, like the way it changes your emotions over seconds is profound. You're happy, you're sad, you're angry, you're happy, you're inspired, like all of these things. And the human brain was just not meant for that sort of roller coaster of emotions at one time. And so I think until there's some sort of reckoning with media, and I don't know if that's possible in this distraction age, like this TikTok news cycle, for example. I don't know how we can come back to a shared reality on anything. We don't have to agree on things, but we have to agree of like the basics for how society works at least, or that we want the best for each other. But I think we're so far from that.
No, we absolutely are, and it's like I say, because everything is just the left that or the right that. I mean, and so
Right,
I don't want to discount that the left does the same thing. People on the left, whatever category you want to do, there's a lot of people on the left that think the same way, that feel the same way, and some of that they were just fed this outrage day and night about how terrible people on with
totally.
the other ideas are, and so we fall into it. So it happens, and that's the problem, is that we're doing it from both sides. That we're not, and we think we're looking at issues, we think we're looking at facts, in terms of the two, saying we sort of live in two different worlds, and much of that is our selection of filter bubbles and the media consumption that we do. So it might, we might not be seeing the same facts. So we might be just seeing a different curated set of different facts that align better with what they want to be told. And two,
Right,
we're going to interpret those facts, are going to be presented and contextualized a different way in your bubble. Even if so, the same two facts can make a case for either argument if they're presented in that way. So a lot of it is the
right,
narrative that they're wrapped in, and you're right about that. I mean, until we get more serious about stepping back, asking yourself, am I seeing the full picture here? Is this as bad as they're telling me it is? Those kinds of questions, until you're doing that, and looking at, even if you do want to, participate in your side's, cheerleading news, you know, try to look at it with that lens, that they are trying to manipulate you. They are trying to get you mad. They are trying to show you put the other side in the worst possible light. They're leaving out anything that might make the other side look like reasonable and rational. And so you're just getting mad all the time. And now anything that happens, you feel you owe, like you're owed, like you owe them retribution. They have violated something. And
right.
that's where we all are now. And so when you talk about like how can we get out of this, the experts that have been studying this for a long time kind of talk about this idea of hitting rock bottom, almost like an addict, where we just finally get
Really?
tired of it. And I think we're seeing some signs of that. I mean, I think one thing is, one indicator is sort of, the majority. There's such a majority of folks that want to self-proclaim as independent. Like they may typically vote one way or the other more often than not, but they don't want to be labeled as that tribe. Like they don't want to be labeled
Right.
as a Republican or a Democrat. They want to hold on to that independent labeling. And I think that's one indicator that people are a little tired of it. And I think you're seeing a few other ones. But what concerns me about this idea of we've got to hit rock bottom is I don't know what rock bottom looks like. Like if
Not good.
January 6th
Like I,
wasn't it, if the pandemic wasn't it, then what does rock bottom look like? I just worry that will we have, mess things up so bad by the time at rock bottom is going to be pretty much impossible to dig ourselves out. So I do worry
right.
about that, but that's what most people, that's what most of the experts sort of believe. Well, when they study this kind of polarization that occurred around the country, it sort of ends one of two ways, right? I mean, it ends with a civil war or a dictatorship or something like that, where that somebody just assumes power. Um, uh, and civil war never really gets you anywhere. Like you just finish the war and you're right back where you started most of the time. But sometimes that civil war is maybe the catalyst, or the beginnings of a civil war is the catalyst to say, hey, we don't want to do this anymore. We had a bunch of people die, and now we don't want to be like that anymore. And that was the catalyst, but that's not a good catalyst. Like, we don't want a civil war, right? But
Sure.
that's, so it either does that or some other kind of a rock bottom that people say they finally get to this point that, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. And so that's kind of what all the experts say. And I'm of the mind that things can change quickly, even though it's been a long time coming, and it's been a long time
Yeah.
getting worse, and it's been a long time people working on this problem. I feel like once things start to change, they can change quickly. It's just going to take the right catalyst, the right spark that turns, a few people being upset about it into a movement. And politicians will react to the populace. I mean, they want to win elections, so we have agency in changing how politicians behave, and even corporations as well. I mean, like, this is a big challenge we have today, that everybody's sort of uh, been bought off, right? I mean, it's not like only the Republicans are bought off or only the Democrats are bought off. Those companies and corporations invest on both sides. Like, they're gonna hedge their bets. They're not gonna take a chance. So, there's so much corporate influence, but we have agency there too, right? We can influence those corporations with how we spend our money and that kind of thing. And that's what, worries them. We do have a lot more. Like, if our vote didn't matter, they wouldn't spend so much energy to get it, right? So our votes still matter. And and that's, and vote's only one thing, right? There's a lot of other stuff you can do, but
Right.
so that's kind of what I see as the best hope, is that we can turn, some of these folks that are upset about it and want to change into a movement. And once that happens, I believe it could happen fast.